Well, now to talk about the burning issue of bankers and their bonuses, with me is Ralph Silva, strategist at the Silva Research Network. Thank you very much for coming in. As I was just saying, you know, David Cameron and the coalition are kind of getting slated in the press today for taking their foot off the gas, I suppose, when it comes to bashing bankers and their bonuses. I suppose the question is, would there be a solution to this which would keep the public happy? Because really, whether or not Bob Diamond's bonus is 8 million or 4 million or 2 million, wouldn't they still be getting a pretty hard time right now?
They certainly would. As long as they get paid more than £30,000, I think they would be getting some kind of backing on this. But Cameron has realized one thing. He's got a better chance of climbing Mount Everest and trainers than he does in getting the change in the bonus culture within the UK. Why? Because he will literally kill the British banking system. And at one point, the British banking system represented 20% of the GDP of this country, and you can't be messing with that. So he has got a much better chance of encouraging the banks to lend more, and I think that's where his focus is now. Indeed.
No, there are obviously other issues. Bob Diamond's still going to face a pretty hard time today, because for a lot of MPs, they can make a lot of political capital out of, and indeed newspaper headlines, out of giving Bob Diamond a hard time on this issue.
Absolutely. But the real focus of the testimony is about diversification in the banking industry, so that's important. But the worst thing about the bonuses is the timing. For the first time, it's actually a bonus is being introduced at the same time that people are losing their jobs due to the austerity program. And because of that, the politicians need to get their punches in to show that they do want to fix the banking issue. And I think Bob Diamond's going to be the focus of that.
Indeed, indeed. Now, is it more important that we stabilise the banking industry overall? I mean, obviously, bashing bankers is very easy to comprehend and makes very good copy. But overall, if we're looking at a more stable financial industry going forward, which would benefit indeed the whole country, then it's more about stabilising the banking industry, isn't it, rather than cutting headline bonuses?
That's absolutely true, and that's the reason why the government cannot impose bonus restrictions on RBS, where they own a majority and they have the right to do so, because if they did that, they would deter the banking industry in the UK from growing. We need the banks to lend. We need the banks to be profitable. We need the banks to be large, and the only way we can sustain that is to offer competitive salaries.
So do you think David Cameron's on the right track then when he talks about trying to push towards lending? And how much can we do? Because this is not the first time we've heard it. It's been around almost as long as bankers' bonuses, right?
The banks have taken a very conservative view towards lending, and I think that David Cameron has the right to say, take a slightly bigger risk. The economy's turning around, it's getting a little more stable, the banks should be taking a greater risk on the lending that they do to businesses. But I think the most important thing here is to focus the lending in the right areas. Don't give it to the Vodafones of the world. You got to give it to the small to medium-sized businesses in the UK that hire people. That's where the focus has to be, and David Cameron has the ability to move the focus in that direction.
No, we've also got, of course, the big Vickers Report coming out about the idea that banks may be split up, and in fact that's really what Bob Diamond's supposed to be talking about today, although that might be hijacked for bonus reasons. But how far along the road to sorting that one out are we?
I think that most of the governments have realize that smaller banks are in fact riskier banks, because we have noticed that we lose one or two banks and it's a systemic problem throughout. What Bob Diamond is going to argue is that the more diversified the bank, the less risk is associated with the bank. And I think that most of the government agencies have realized that that is the case. The problem is we need more larger banks instead of more smaller banks, and that's a problem. Is how do you get the big banks to actually come to this country?
Yeah, at the moment it doesn't appear that the situation in the UK is really particularly appealing for banks.
It's not. The regulations are there. There are going to be more regulations coming into place. Since this crisis started, banks are paying 25% more taxes than they did before the crisis. So it's very expensive to be a banker these days. And for that reason, foreign banks are staying away.
Well, cutting taxes on banks arriving in the UK would probably not be popular either.
No, not at all.
Okay, Ralph, thank you very much for that.